Over the last 10 or 15 years, the IMDB Top 15 has sort of been a way to measure what the internet's favorite films are. So today I'm going to stop and rank the IMDB Top 15 from the least best to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of the IMDB Top 15. If you need the list, it's down below in the description. And my list isn't the right list. It's not the objective list or anything like that. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. One more thing before we get started. This video is brought to you by Audible. You can get a free audiobook of your choice by signing up for a free 30-day trial of Audible at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. If you look at this list, The Godfather, Forrest Gump, Lord of the Rings, Fight Club, Schindler's List, Shawshank, they're all based off of books, and you can get one of those books for free if you use that link down below in the description, audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. Get yourself a free audiobook. I love Audible, and let's get started. Coming in last place is The Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers. Now, to be clear, even though this is in last place, because of the nature of this list, this is still a very good movie. But in terms of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, this one has always kind of been the weakest to me because it just feels like a bridge between the beginning and the end. The inherent nature of the trilogy, it plays out like one long story. So the first movie has the hook of introducing all the characters and the conflict. The third movie has all of the payoff of this journey that all these characters have been on. Then you have The Two Towers, which is just a lot of them traveling, a lot of building the stakes, but I don't think it's quite as emotionally potent as being introduced or feeling the payoff of everything. Now, granted, the final battle in this film is phenomenal. It's a great sequence that has character moments. You feel the stakes, you feel the fear as maybe they're not going to make it. There's a great, the cavalry comes to rescue moment inside of it. The characters ride off knowing that they might die. It has all the stuff that you want from a great battle sequence. The movie's still very good, but of the Lord of the Rings trilogy, this would be my least favorite of the bunch. Number 14, Fight Club. This feels like a movie designed for people in a very specific phase of life as you're discovering adulthood, moving out of adolescence, trying to discover your purpose, and understanding a lot of your assumptions about the world around us, capitalism, and how things function aren't quite as clear as you once thought when you were younger and had a more simplistic view of the world. Enter the movie Fight Club, and it turns all of that stuff on its head, blows your mind both through its style, the twist ending, and just the ideas being introduced throughout the film. But it does it in a way that's like, where is this coming from? Why are guys behaving this way? Why do so many dudes not feel like they have a purpose? And I think that's why this is one of these movies that is like connected so well with so many generations, and to this day, 20 years after it came out, is still in the IMDb Top 15. Next up, The Lord of the Rings, The Fellowship of the Ring. This movie is just such a great introduction to Middle-earth that spends a lot of time introducing us to these characters and building out Middle-earth so we understand its history, the different kingdoms, so that we can have this epic adventure throughout this trilogy. Big part of why it works is because there's so much phenomenal casting, and then each of these characters are interesting, complex, and have an actual arc. We understand their different value sets that determine their actions, that bring them into conflict with the other heroes on this journey that they're on. Of course, there's plenty of fantastic action. This movie and trilogy are the standard when it comes to fantasy for good reason. At the same time, of the movies in the trilogy, this is the one to me where I felt the most like they were trying to squish this large book into a movie that can be released in theaters, probably because there was so much world building that had to be done, so it had to rush through a few things. Number 12, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. Some people grew up watching John Wayne, and then people like me grew up watching Clint Eastwood. I was introduced to his spaghetti westerns and always had a fondness for them, probably because I was introduced to them through the movie Back to the Future 2, which shows a clip from A Fistful of Dollars, and so I wanted to figure out what movie is that, and then I've loved it ever since. And the most praised of the bunch was The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. This epic Western about three outlaws trying to track down this treasure in the context of the Civil War, where you kind of explore each of them to see what kind of makes them the way that they are, how they come in conflict with one another, and you realize the guy that's the good, he's not actually all that good of a guy as you go throughout the story. Of course, Clint Eastwood is just so good at playing in these films as these anti-hero type characters. For me personally, I've always liked A Fistful of Dollars more than The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I think the length fits the pacing of these films just a little bit more, resonates with me a little bit better, but still one of the great westerns of all time. Number 11, The Godfather Part II. If the first Godfather showed a good man, a war hero breaking bad, and what would cause him to do that and where that can take him, the second film truly explores what happens when someone becomes obsessed with power and control and what it will cost them. Throughout the film, you just see him rationalizing doing worse and worse things without realizing that he's actually losing all the things that he's claiming that he values. At the beginning of Michael's journey, it was all about family, protecting his family, avenging his father, making it right. And throughout this film, you just see all the ways in which the people closest to him resent him the most and face actual dire consequences from him. It's a compelling journey, and it's paralleled with that story of his father's rise to power. There's a lot of debate as to whether Godfather Part II or Godfather Part I is better. Obviously, I prefer The Godfather Part I, but this is still a phenomenal film. Bringing us into the top 10 is The Lord of the Rings: Return of the King. For me, the third film in the trilogy is the best as it pays off everything so well. When you have so much backstory in the previous two films to establish all these characters, get to know them, see the conflicts in front of them, that creates a scenario where the third film can have such a satisfying conclusion because everything feels earned. Because we've been on this journey for so long with the characters, all of it works so well. Of course, you also have big, sweeping, epic battles. You see evil triumphed over. And you see friendships and family members. You see people that truly care about each other and would be willing to lay down their life for others. And all of it hits the right notes, emotionally speaking. So for me, this is the best of the trilogy and a great way to send it off. Then we have 12 Angry Men, possibly the greatest bottle film of all time. And what I mean by that is the entire movie, besides the opening scene and the closing scene, takes place in one room and it never cuts away to anything else, but it manages to be compelling and have conflict and have payoff all through dialogue. And the reason this works so well is that the movie, it's very character-based, where you have 12 men in a room, each of them with a different personality, a different worldview, a different backstory, all presented with the same information. And throughout the course of the film, you see how they respond to it in accordance with their worldview, in accordance with their backstory, revealing their biases and all the different ways that we can misinterpret information right in front of us. It's pretty astounding that this story is over 60 years old and it feels just as relevant today as it was back then. And it's just as engaging today as it was when it was first released. Number 8, Schindler's List. This is an incredibly difficult movie to rank on a list like this because on the one hand, it's incredibly profound, moving, and important. And on the other, it's a movie that you're never actually in the mood to watch. In fact, when it came to doing this video itself and having to rewatch all of these movies, this is the one that my wife and I kept delaying and delaying having to rewatch for the purpose of this video. But the film is a remarkable and important achievement in that it captures just how horrific the Holocaust really was, but it explores it from a lot of different angles. It makes it real in that you see that there were true monsters in the mix, the horrific faces to the victims of what took place. And then you have people like Oskar Schindler who were in the middle of it, who was a member of the Nazi Party, who was looking to profiteer from all of this, and it was transformed in the process of seeing what was happening. And while going on this journey with him, it brings so much of this to life. We all know it was awful, but this makes you feel it on a totally different level. And while it's a movie I legitimately never want to watch again, it's an important film for everyone to watch at least once. Next up, The Dark Knight. When it comes to The Dark Knight, this is one of these movies that transcends its own genre. Instead of taking inspiration from all the comic book movies that came before it, Nolan, his brother, and David Goyer dove into a bunch of these crime films and tried to tell a complex story where by the end of the film, the hero's no longer the good guy, and the guy that's the white knight at the beginning, it becomes the villain of the story. In fact, all building towards the theme of what would a dark knight truly be. And in doing so, they made a very special film that changed the direction of the genre in general. And of course, it gave us this amazing performance from Heath Ledger that what it was able to do was he was able to actually transform from who we always thought he was, the way we always perceived of him, and he turned into this very disturbing version of the Joker. Put it all together and you get a movie that has depth, phenomenal performances, great action. It's one of the best of its genre. Number 6, Forrest Gump. This is probably the first Best Picture winner that I actually saw in the theater during its original run. But when I went to go rewatch it to do this video, I probably hadn't seen the movie in over 10 years because it's not one that my wife likes very much because her name is Jennifer. And so all throughout the 90s, people kept going, Jenny, all around her, which she did not appreciate. And rewatching it, man, I absolutely thought that this movie held up. And watching it as an adult in many ways was more profound and powerful than it was before because I resonated with the characters, not just the funny, quotable little moments inside of it. What the movie does so well is it constantly sets up little barriers in front of Forrest and has him overcome them. And so it's constantly setback, something amusing in that, and then an uplifting moment where he overcomes all the obstacles in front of him in life. And the underrated hero of the film is really Lieutenant Dan, who has one of the best character arcs in cinema history, but because he's not the star of the film, it sometimes gets overshadowed. But you get to the end of this movie where he walks up and all he does is smile, and you know everything you need to know about where this man is at. And it puts such a grin on your face just to see him happy in that moment. It's profound stuff, and the whole film is just saturated with big emotions just like that. Bringing us into the top 5 is The Godfather, Mario Puzo and Francis Ford Coppola's mob epic that manages to tell this huge story spanning years of how this war hero that wanted nothing to do with the family business was able to take over the family and exact his revenge and become the exact person he wanted to avoid. By today's standard, this is a very slow-paced movie, so some people might not immediately resonate with it, but because it's so slow-paced, it's able to tell this complex story with a lot of layers where you notice everything that's important. And there's events that take place and you go, wait, that's not right. I think something was up right there. And the movie won't bring it back up until the very end of the film, and you remember it. You don't forget anything because it's so deliberately paced so you can follow all of it, so that you can feel the moments of satisfaction that also have elements of horror inside of them, that you can have a little bit of romance in it, but at the same time being like, wait, this guy's lying in what he's doing. And you feel all of it because of the way it's told, and truly is one of the great movies of all time. Number 4, The Shawshank Redemption. This is a movie that's somewhat famous for its inclusion in the IMDB top 10. It wasn't a big hit when it first came out. It didn't win Best Picture, but the internet loved it. The internet voted it up, and therefore, because of the IMDB top 10 and other things like it, it became famous and a movie that more and more people started to explore and check out, and its reputation just grew and grew because of it. At its core, you have a film that has its straightforward interpretation as you're watching it. You can follow it and appreciate the character dynamics. But what's so cool about this movie is nothing is quite as simple as you think. Every action, in fact, has multiple interpretations. Each character has multiple layers, so even the cruelest and meanest of characters will have moments where they'll do something that you appreciate and you're rooting for them, leading up to when you kind of have the final twists and reveals in the film. It convinces you, based off everything we've seen up to that point in time, that perhaps we hit a moment of absolute hopelessness. And then when we have the revelations, we realize that so much of what we saw before needs to be reinterpreted. And it's so satisfying and hits all the right notes. It's a character study. It's uplifting. It does so many things so well and draws big emotions out of you. Remember to share your ranking down below in the comment section. My list is not the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, remember, you can get a free audiobook of your choice at audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. A bunch of these movies are based off of great books. You can get one of them for free, audibletrial.com/Sean Chandler. In third place is Inception. For me, this is Christopher Nolan's masterpiece, where he was able to combine his big, crazy, bonkers Christopher Nolan ideas with an accessible genre and meshed them together perfectly. As much as this film has very complex, layered storytelling about going into people's dreams, it's all clear as to everything that's going on. Beyond that, it's also a Nolan film that very much is character-based. Nolan knew that if he let the dream stuff take over too much, that people wouldn't feel anything. So then he has this compelling story about Cobb, his wife, and his kids. That's a mystery that runs throughout the entire film that has little revelations and reveals all throughout it, leading to the third act where we finally understand everything going on with him and his wife. And it's also a movie that's so well crafted that by the time you get to the end of it, there's multiple interpretations of what did you just see, and you can debate it back and forth and point to actual things in the movie because it's cohesive in different paths that you can go down. It all depends on what thing was most important to you. Put it all together. To me, this is Nolan at his best, with big ideas packaged in a mainstream way that's accessible to broad audiences. Our runner-up is Pulp Fiction. In this film, Quentin Tarantino takes the familiar genre of the criminal underworld and finds a way to subvert every expectation that you have about a movie in this genre. And instead of being about a big heist or the fight where the boxer kills someone, it tells a story about all the moments in between the interesting things in the criminal underworld. And the way this works is because Quentin Tarantino makes such great characters and writes amazing dialogue that's about absolutely nothing, but is somehow still memorable, quotable, and interesting. He also makes a movie that consistently sets you up to think the movie's going in one direction and then just does something totally different with it. You have two characters on a date. They're both intoxicated. Clearly, the guy is thinking he's going to make a move on her, and they set up the fact that if he does that, he will be killed by her husband. But it turns out that's not the real conflict. The real conflict is she overdoses on drugs. Put it all together and you have a movie that defies almost all the rules for how I normally evaluate a film. And for some reason, because of all of that, it's one of the greatest movies of all time. But coming in first place for me has to be Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. I grew up on the original trilogy. I love all three of those films, watched them on loop growing up, continue to watch them on loop as a grown-up, and my favorite of the bunch has always been The Empire Strikes Back. The first movie did such a great job of introducing us to this world and building a fantastic foundation with amazing characters, so by the time you get to this film, it's able to just keep going deeper with them. And so we get this story of becoming, sort of an origin story for Luke as he trains with Yoda. We get a romance between Han and Leia. We have betrayal from Lando, who does the wrong thing, but not entirely just because he's a bad guy. And of course, you have one of the greatest twists of all time with the Vader-Luke reveal in the third act of this film. And in this movie, you absolutely care about everyone, everything. It's quotable. The action is even better than the previous film by just being better choreographed and better designed and having a better budget. And so for me, coming in at number one, because it means so much to me and has meant so much to why I even make videos like this, It's Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. If you want to know more of my favorite movies of all time, check out that video right over there. If you want that free audiobook from Audible, use that link down below in the description. A bunch of these movies are based off of books. You can get one of them for free. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies too much.